"Et tu, brute." Those were the last words of the most powerful man who ever lived. Gaius Julius Caesar lay bleeding on the floor of the Roman Senate, 23 stab wounds covering his body. Around him stood 60 senators, their togas stained with his blood, their daggers dripping with betrayal. Among them was Marcus Brutus, the young man Caesar loved like a son. It was March 15th, 44 BC, the Ides of March, the day the Roman Republic died with its greatest son. Caesar had conquered Gaul. He had crossed the Rubicon. He had defeated Pompey and become master of the known world. The Senate had declared him dictator for life. Some whispered he would soon be crowned king, even God. But power, no matter how absolute, cannot protect you from the people closest to you. This is the story of a man who rose higher than any Roman before him, only to discover that the greatest danger doesn't come from your enemies. It comes from your friends. What would you sacrifice to rule the world if you knew that success would make everyone you trust want to destroy you? Gaius Julius Caesar was born on July 13th, 100 BC, into one of Rome's oldest patrician families. The Julii claimed descent from Venus herself, the goddess of love and beauty. From birth, Caesar was told he was destined for greatness. But Rome in 100 BC was a republic in crisis. The old ways were dying. The Senate, once the guardian of Roman virtue, had become corrupt and ineffective. Ambitious generals were using their armies to seize power. Civil war seemed inevitable. Caesar's family was connected to Gaius Marius, the great general who had reformed the Roman army and dominated politics for a generation. When Caesar was 16, Marius arranged his marriage to Cornelia, daughter of another powerful politician. It was a political alliance, but Caesar genuinely loved his young wife. When the dictator Sulla seized power and ordered Caesar to divorce Cornelia, Caesar refused. It was his first act of defiance against authority. It would not be his last. Sulla's men hunted Caesar through the streets of Rome. He was forced to flee the city, hiding in the countryside while his family negotiated for his life. Finally, influential friends convinced Sulla to spare the young man. "Very well," Sulla reportedly said. "But remember this: in Caesar there are many Mariuses." Sulla was more prophetic than he knew. Caesar returned to Rome determined to make his mark. He was tall, handsome, and charismatic. He was also ruthlessly ambitious. He studied rhetoric, mastered the art of public speaking, and began climbing the cursus honorum, the ladder of Roman political offices. But Caesar was different from other ambitious Romans. He understood that in the new Rome, power came not from the Senate but from the people. He courted the masses with spectacular games, generous gifts, and populist policies. He also understood the importance of military glory. In 61 BC, Caesar was appointed governor of further Spain. There, he led successful campaigns against local tribes, earning both wealth and military reputation. But Caesar's greatest opportunity came in 60 BC, when he formed the first triumvirate with Pompey the Great and Marcus Crassus, the richest man in Rome. It was an unofficial alliance of the three most powerful men in the Republic. Pompey had military glory, Crassus had money, Caesar had political cunning. Together, they effectively controlled Rome. The triumvirate secured Caesar the consulship in 59 BC and then the governorship of Gaul, modern-day France, Belgium, and parts of Germany and Switzerland. Gaul was considered a backwater assignment. The Senate thought they were getting rid of Caesar by sending him to the frontier. They had made a terrible mistake. Caesar arrived in Gaul in 58 BC with 4 legions, about 24,000 men. The Gallic tribes were numerous, fierce, and had never been fully conquered by Rome. Caesar saw opportunity where others saw obstacles. For the next 8 years, Caesar waged one of the most brilliant military campaigns in history. He conquered tribe after tribe, extending Roman rule to the Atlantic Ocean and the English Channel. His tactics were innovative and ruthless. He built bridges across rivers in days. He besieged hilltop fortresses thought to be impregnable. He marched his legions through forests and swamps that no Roman army had ever crossed. The climax came in 52 BC at Alesia, where the Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix made his last stand. Caesar surrounded the hilltop fortress with a double wall, one to keep the Gauls in, another to keep reinforcements out. When a massive Gallic relief army arrived, Caesar found himself trapped between two enemy forces. Any other general would have retreated. Caesar attacked both armies simultaneously and won. Vercingetorix surrendered to save his people. Caesar had conquered all of Gaul. The victory made Caesar fabulously wealthy and gave him a veteran army fanatically loyal to him personally. It also made him the most famous man in the Roman world. But success bred enemies. Back in Rome, the triumvirate was falling apart. Crassus had died fighting the Parthians in the east. Pompey, jealous of Caesar's growing power, was turning against his former ally. The Senate, terrified of Caesar's popularity and military strength, ordered him to disband his armies and return to Rome as a private citizen. Caesar knew this was a trap. Without his armies and his immunity as a governor, his enemies would prosecute him on trumped-up charges. His career would be over. He might even be executed. Caesar had a choice: obey the Senate and face destruction, or defy the Republic and face civil war. On January 10th, 49 BC, Caesar made his decision. Standing on the banks of the Rubicon River, the boundary between Gaul and Italy, Caesar addressed his soldiers. Roman law forbade any general from bringing an army into Italy. Crossing the Rubicon with his legions would be an act of war against the Republic. Alea iacta est, Caesar declared. The die is cast. He spurred his horse into the shallow river. Behind him, the 13th Legion followed. The Roman civil war had begun. Caesar's march on Rome was swift and decisive. Pompey and the Senate fled to Greece, taking the treasury with them. Caesar occupied the capital without a battle, but Caesar was not content to rule just Italy. He pursued Pompey across the Mediterranean, determined to eliminate his rival once and for all. The decisive battle came at Pharsalus in 48 BC. Caesar's veteran legions, outnumbered 2-1, shattered Pompey's larger army. Pompey fled to Egypt, seeking sanctuary. He never made it. Egyptian officials, hoping to curry favor with Caesar, murdered Pompey as he stepped ashore. When Caesar arrived in Alexandria and was presented with Pompey's severed head, he wept. Pompey had been his enemy, but also his former ally and son-in-law. "I wanted to defeat him," Caesar said, "not to see him murdered." In Egypt, Caesar met Cleopatra, the brilliant and beautiful queen who would become his lover and the mother of his son. Their affair scandalized Rome, but Caesar was beyond caring about conventional morality. He was the master of the world. He could do as he pleased. Caesar spent the next 4 years consolidating his power. He defeated the last of his enemies in Africa and Spain. He reformed the calendar, reorganized the government, and launched massive public works projects. He also showed unprecedented clemency to his former enemies. Instead of executing them, as was traditional, Caesar pardoned them and even appointed some to high offices. "I will win them over with kindness," he told his friends. It was a noble sentiment. It was also a fatal mistake. In 44 BC, the Senate declared Caesar dictator for life. Rumors spread that he would soon be crowned king. Some even whispered that he planned to declare himself a god. For Romans, who had expelled their last king 5 centuries earlier, this was intolerable. The republic might be corrupt and inefficient, but it was still preferable to monarchy. A conspiracy began to form. The plot was led by Marcus Brutus, a descendant of the Brutus who had founded the Republic by overthrowing the last king. Caesar had pardoned Brutus after Pharsalus and treated him like a son. But Brutus believed that Caesar's death was necessary to save the Republic. 60 senators joined the conspiracy. They called themselves the Liberators. The assassination was planned for March 15th, 44 BC, the Ides of March. Caesar would be attending a Senate meeting at the theater of Pompey. On the morning of March 15th, Caesar's wife Calpurnia begged him not to go to the Senate. She had dreamed of his death. Soothsayers had warned him to beware the Ides of March. Caesar hesitated. Perhaps he should stay home. But Brutus arrived at Caesar's house and convinced him to come to the Senate. The conspirators were waiting. As Caesar entered the theater of Pompey, the senators surrounded him, pretending to present petitions. Suddenly, Casca struck the first blow, stabbing Caesar in the neck. The other conspirators joined in. Caesar fought back at first, but when he saw Brutus among his attackers, he stopped resisting. "Et tu, Brute!" he gasped. "Then fall, Caesar!" He pulled his toga over his head and died at the base of Pompey's statue, his blood pooling on the marble floor. The conspirators had killed Caesar, but they had not saved the Republic. Caesar's death plunged Rome into 13 years of civil war. His heir, Octavian, would eventually emerge victorious and become Augustus, the first Roman emperor. The Republic the conspirators had died to save was dead. In trying to prevent Caesar from becoming king, they had ensured that his successors would become something far more powerful: emperors. Caesar's funeral became a turning point in Roman history. Mark Antony's speech over Caesar's body turned the Roman people against the assassins. Brutus and the other conspirators were forced to flee the city. Most of them were dead, killed in battle or by suicide. Caesar was deified by the Roman people. A temple was built in his honor. A comet appeared in the sky during his funeral games, which Romans interpreted as Caesar's soul ascending to heaven. The man who had conquered the world had become a god in death, just as his enemies had feared he would in life. But Caesar's greatest victory was not military or political. It was cultural. Caesar's name became synonymous with supreme power. Kaiser, Tsar, Shah, all derived from Caesar. For 2,000 years, rulers have claimed his title and tried to match his achievements. Caesar also left behind one of the greatest works of literature in history, his commentaries on the Gallic Wars. Written in the third person with clinical precision, they remain masterpieces of military history and political propaganda. All Gaul is divided into 3 parts. The work begins. It's one of the most famous opening lines in Latin literature. Caesar's reforms outlasted the Republic he destroyed. His calendar, with minor modifications, is still used today. His architectural projects transformed Rome into the marble capital of the world. But perhaps Caesar's greatest legacy is the lesson his life teaches about power and friendship. Caesar conquered enemies across 3 continents. He defeated armies, toppled kingdoms, and bent nations to his will. But he could not conquer the jealousy and fear of the men closest to him. He showed mercy to his enemies and was killed by his friends. He pardoned those who had fought against him and was murdered by those he had promoted. Caesar's tragedy was not that he was too ambitious. It was that he was too trusting. He believed that his clemency would win over his enemies. He believed that his achievements would secure his legacy. He believed that his friends would remain loyal. He was wrong on all counts. The senators who killed Caesar claimed they were defending the Republic, but they were really defending their own privilege, their own power, their own relevance in a world that Caesar had made obsolete. Caesar represented the future, a world empire ruled by merit rather than birth, by achievement rather than tradition. The conspirators represented the past, a narrow oligarchy clinging to power in a system that no longer worked. History vindicated Caesar. The Roman Empire he founded would last for another 1,500 years. The republic the conspirators died to save lasted exactly 0 days after Caesar's death. Caesar's assassination was not the triumph of republican virtue over tyranny. It was the last gasp of a dying system, the final spasm of men who could not accept that their time was over. In the end, Caesar got the last laugh. He had predicted that his death would bring chaos to Rome, and he was right. The conspirators thought they were saving the Republic. Instead, they destroyed it forever. Caesar had conquered the world and become a god. His friends had stabbed him, but they could not kill what he represented. The age of Caesar had begun, and it would never end. Today, when we speak of crossing the Rubicon, we mean making an irreversible decision. When we speak of the Ides of March, we mean a day of reckoning. When we speak of et tu, Brute, we mean the ultimate betrayal. Caesar gave us these phrases, and much more. He gave us the template for every strong man who would follow, every emperor who would claim his title, every leader who would promise to make their nation great again. He conquered the world and became a god. His friends stabbed him, but his legacy proved immortal. Julius Caesar, the man who destroyed the Roman Republic to save the Roman Empire, who died at the hands of friends to live forever in history. He came, he saw, he conquered, and 2,000 years later, we're still living in the world he created. Veni, vidi, vici. Et tu, Brute. Alea iacta est. The words of Caesar echo through eternity, reminders of a man who reached for godhood and grasped it, even as mortal hands reached for daggers to bring him down. He conquered the world and became a god. But his friends stabbed him, and in doing so, they made him immortal.